dinner with Marty and Sandra Smiley and the presenters. I'm not referring to the salmon and the potatoes. And it was just really nice to finally be done with the planning and be together and see that this is actually happening. But what was really lovely about the dinner was to meet with the presenters and to all kind of come together and hear why they're here and to get a sense of what they're doing. We really have a great group of people who are doing things in different places around the world, and you'll hear from them tomorrow. We have been using the phrase, the living tradition of peace building here in this house, in this parlor. I like to think of this as a sacred space. This is the same room where those international arbitration conferences went on for so long. And when I come in here, I get this sense that the energy and the intention of those days and everything else has transpired here since it still lives here. And we're just kind of tuning in and being part of the flow of that energy. You'll hear more tomorrow from Louisa Finn about the history of those conferences and what we've done in the past. And that's all the past. But the living tradition will take us into the future. As Marty said, when we act on our inspiration that comes from here or from wherever else you get it, we will all be part of the continuing living tradition of peace building here at Mohonk and wherever you live and wherever you act. And the title, creating and sustaining peace. Those are verbs, creating and sustaining. And peace building, that's a verb too. And I used to see these billboards, visualize world peace. That's great because where there's no vision, the people perish. But again, I just want to emphasize that these are active words, creating, building, and sustaining. So it's a great way to start, to visualize, but then we need to act to manifest our vision. I was in Lowe's a few weeks ago. You guys know what Lowe's is, right? Like Home Depot. It was the last week of summer, and I walked in and I see Christmas trees for sale, artificial Christmas trees. I won't talk about the materialization things, but it got me to think about Christmas, which got me to think about the Christmas spirit. And you know that phrase, peace on earth, goodwill to men and women. And on that one day, people are expected to, and we do, embrace the Christmas spirit. And there is a sense of goodwill and of giving and being nice and caring about each other. But then I think, what about the other 364 days of the year? What kind of world is this that we just have that one special day to be nice to each other? So I hope somehow we all can be a part of transforming things so that the Christmas spirit is present all the time and that we're all part of the expression of goodwill. I'll say more about goodwill tomorrow. And so this conference here, this gathering, this talking it over at Mohonk, is great, but it's just one place where this is going on. When I spoke with the people here at dinner, it was just so great to hear that people are doing this in Bosnia and Australia, in Italy, all over the planet. And so it's good to just know and to kind of sense and imagine that we are connected to all these other efforts all over. It's part of the same wave of peace building, the same expression of goodwill. So I hope that tonight and through this weekend, even after you leave, you all can embrace and express the spirit of peace. I'm supposed to talk about the conference, but I think you guys should have the programs. We have a really full day tomorrow. Philip and Sakina are doing our keynotes, and we have a great panel about practical solutions that people are involved with on the ground that are making changes. And we're going to live stream event tomorrow, and my rough math tells me that there are about 900,000 people who got an e-blast about this conference. So I'm imagining if 1 in 100 watches it, that's 9,000 people who will be here with us. So again, it's another way to embrace the larger group that's part of this expression of the spirit of peace. They'll be with us on a more subtle level. And after the conference, you'll be able to see a video of tomorrow, and also Evelyn back there is video recording this, and with the live streaming, there'll be segments of each speaker. So you can watch it. You also have the opportunity to maybe tell your friends it's still time. They can go to our website and click on the link at their home or wherever they are, and they can watch it on the internet. So in different, beyond this conference, we always have a follow-up forum in the spring. That'll be April 5th. What it will look like, we don't know yet. We want to wait until this happens, and then we'll continue in some manner to be determined. One little housekeeping comment. There are restrooms out the store and to the left, also on other floors. So, Dot Maver, sitting right here, is not just a speaker today, a facilitator tomorrow, but she has been part of our planning and our inspiration all along. And she was also a speaker and facilitator at our conference a few years ago. My original introduction to her, because she does so much, was 37 pages, but I don't have time to read that, so I'll only read 35. Dorothy J. Maver, PhD, is an educator and peace builder whose keynote is inspiring cooperation on behalf of the common good. It's kind of what's all about, the common good. Dot was founding president. Huh? I mean, I don't have to introduce her. She can just do her thing. You know who she is. But some of her background, she was founding president and is a board member and trustee of the National Peace Academy USA, is a co-founding board member of the Global Alliance for Ministries and Infrastructures of Peace, and she was the founding executive director of the River Phoenix Center for Peace Building. And we have right behind her over there, Jeffrey Weisberg, who is currently the executive director of the River Phoenix Center for Peace Building. Her work in education, politics, and grassroots community organizing is focused on applied peace building, utilizing a shared responsibility and shared leadership model. From 2005 until 2007, Dot served as executive director of the Peace Alliance and campaigned for a U.S. Department of Peace. Remember we had the Department of War once? And prior to that, she was the national campaign manager for Dennis Kucinich for president in 2004. And in the world of fast-pitch softball, Dot is known for her revolutionary fast-pitch hitting technique, the Maver method, secrets of hitting success. And maybe in April when she's here, we can play the ball. There's a lot of other stuff, but I don't know if she wants me to say it. Step it right in, I'm going to shut up.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Always it's good to be here at Mohonk. This weekend in particular is like a bit of a family reunion for yours truly, as so many colleagues are here, literally from around the world. So we'll get that up in a second, so we'll just go. Peace in our time is the topic this evening, and I want to say thank you to the Mountain House and Mohonk Consultations for this merge that we're doing this weekend. It's just brilliant to land in the midst of Talk It Over at Mohonk around anchoring the spirit of peace. And a very special honoring and thank you to Keith Smiley. As you heard from Marty, there's so much to be said about Keith's work here, and it feels like we are, as Jeffrey says, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. I also want to give a shout out to the youth in the room, the Human Rights Club. Just give a tiny raise of hand. High school. Grateful to see all the youth here, and on Sunday morning, that's going to be a wonderful panel. You know, oops. That's in honor of Keith Smiley. We intuitively know that we are part of something greater than ourselves. I mean, even just at dinner, as Brad said, we long for the world that we know in our hearts. A world in which humanity recognizes that we are part of a sacred system of all life, and that we share a responsibility to help this ever-emerging society as stewards of the planet. Elder brothers and sisters to animals, plants, vegetables, and minerals. But we also are a resource, and we forget that sometimes. And it's this world in which the central point is the culture of peace and nonviolence. Now, granted, we are presently, not just in the United States, but as Dr. Jacobi pointed out, in Afghanistan and elsewhere in the world, we are dealing with an all-systems breakdown. It's painful. However, we are simultaneously experiencing an all-systems breakthrough, and that's what we are speaking to at this conference. So let's take just a moment and define peace, which is not the absence of violence or the opposite of war, because what we are doing this evening, in this relatively short period of time, is we are sharing responsibility to seed the field, to create the container within which this living laboratory comes alive over the weekend. So from the Declaration and Program of Action on the Culture of Peace, a culture of peace is a set of values, attitudes, traditions, and modes of behavior and ways of life. From the Earth Charter, signed on by countries around the world, peace is the wholeness created by right relationships with oneself, other persons, other cultures, other life, Earth, and the larger whole of which all are a part. So simply put, peace is living in right relationship with self, others, and all life. Now, we're talking about peace in our time and creating and sustaining peace. And that's the tricky part, right? Because we need the support system. We can create it. Many of us in the room know how to do that. But we have yet to have the societal will and the political will to sustain it. So I just want to speak briefly, a synopsis. We were talking at dinner, it's really been one generation of developing peace education, and only in this century have we really landed the term peace building and begun to define and develop what that means. In fact, so much has transpired over these 50 years, it's hard to speak, 50 years plus actually, it's hard to speak to all of it. But in the 60s, it was mainly a people movement. Many of us in this room were part of it. Love, peace, gender equity, social justice, and more. And then, for decades, research, advocacy, programs, peace education, for 40 years and into this century. And then, in the early part of this century, a UN Peacebuilding Commission, peace ambassadors training. You'll hear from Philip Helmick tomorrow. Nonviolent Peace Force, governments beginning to consider the efficacy of ministries for peace and offices of peace, an EU crisis response, 26 warning systems across Nigeria, and we could go on for a long time with this list. However, while we understand so much at this point, and we have so many great programs, you'll hear about many of them this weekend, and they focus on peace building, conflict resolution, restorative justice, mediation, social emotional learning, trauma resiliency, and more. We have yet to build the architecture of peace, a true infrastructure of peace, and to institutionalize peace so that it becomes a societal norm, supported by both policy and legislation. So you're in for a wonderful conference with so many peace builders focusing on solutions and building a world that works for everyone. Now, basically, we seem to have reached a plateau of sorts. And the old system that we're still living in, transitioning out of, it's still inclined to choose weapons of war. The emerging system has yet to fully land as a societal norm. A colleague, Kybran Jakobsen, founder of Patria in Romania, he recently shared at the annual meeting for the Global Alliance for Ministries and Infrastructures for Peace that the Global Economic Peace Index shows us that a systems crisis is growing, while our capacity to address it at the governmental level is not. We spoke to this at dinner as well. It's about we the people. We need to develop an architecture for peace and support institutionalizing peace. And that begins with us locally, these models in our communities. So what's needed? Advocacy, policies, support for effective programs. And in various countries where programs are being implemented, there are both donors and co-workers asking, what are the best practices in the field? What is being done elsewhere? How do we implement trauma healing in our community? What are the peace-building trainings available? What are the solutions? Well, we live in amazing times, and we are charged to connect our innovative creativity with solutions to the present all systems breakdown. Yeah. So I forget about the PowerPoint when I just get into this. So there's a group in New York called What Better Looks Like. And we might ask that pertinent question right now. If we can create the world that we want, how many of you think we have the capacity to create the world that we want? Okay, so most of us in this room agree with that concept. So if that's true, let's take a moment together to bring that in. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes or not, but just take a deep breath and relax for a moment. I want you to think through your heart. And there will have been perhaps a number of moments in your life, but at least one. Sometime when you've connected with yourself deeply. Perhaps even realized why you're here. What is it that you came to contribute to this?